Okay, my friends, welcome to the third lesson in the A module. This is all about designing your space, how to optimize your environment for healthier habits. When you properly design your space, progress becomes almost inevitable. And I've experienced that firsthand with designing this space here. My girlfriend and I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment specifically for the reason of having a space where I can be as creative as possible in a separate room. Before my office, quote unquote, was in the kitchen, and now it is in this entirely separate room, which I have also used as a designated space to be a little bit more mindful about how I use my phone. So I'd love to go over that with you by showing you what my space was before. And it's almost laughable. This is the desk that I worked at, right? It's fine, it's not bad. But it's also not great, especially when it gets cluttered. You can see this was actually in the midst of me building the desk setup that I'm at right now, but still in my old place. The main idea here is that the space where we spend the most time has a huge effect on how and why we use our phones. It's a huge factor that this space caused stress. Not only was it not a standing desk, but it was in the middle of a completely different room that it shouldn't have been in. It was what we had to work with, so obviously it was fine for a little bit, but when you're stressed, that's a huge reason you pick up your phone. You can optimize any space of any size, which is super important here. And that is why I've made it a point to optimize this space that I'm in right now. James Clear says to stop thinking about your environment as filled with objects and to start thinking your environment as filled with relationships. So it's not necessarily about the objects you have in a space. It is about the relationship you have to those objects in that space. Small changes in context can lead to large changes in behavior over time. Every habit is initiated by a cue, and we're most likely to notice cues that stand out. So designing a space full of good cues to not use our phone is pretty much integral to this whole lesson. So gradually your habits become associated not with a single trigger, but with an entire context surrounding a behavior. And this context is the thing that becomes a cue. It's easier to build new habits in new environments because you're not fighting old cues. That's why I think I've developed such strong habits here, because this is a new space and I am committed and was committed to making it into something that helps me rather than hinders me. I want to give a quick reminder here on the current space and the 5 common triggers for phone use. Making changes in your own space in favor of eradicating your most common triggers makes being on your phone less much more. Cut that out. I'm going to note that down really quick. This is lesson 3. I want to give a quick reminder on the 5 most common triggers here, with the big idea being making changes to your space in favor of eradicating your most common triggers. I want to give a quick reminder here on the 5 most common triggers for being on your phone, with the big idea being making changes to your space in favor of eradicating your most common triggers makes being on your phone way less accessible. So the 5 common triggers that we went over before are time, right? As there are certain times of day that you find yourself being on your phone. For example, for me, every day at 4 p.m. when I get home from work, it is a time that I have the most temptation. So just being aware of that is super key for me. Are there locations inside your house that make you feel like going on your phone? Maybe it's the couch, maybe it's your bathroom. Hope not. How do you minimize those temptations? Is there something about a preceding event? Maybe it's coming home from work, coming home from school, or another thing that you do in your house that makes you want to scroll. Is there something that happens before that sort of is the trigger for picking up your phone? Are there places in your house that affect your emotional state? Maybe being in your office is kind of triggering for you, which is a thing that sets off your emotional regulation whistle, which makes you pick up your phone. Are there places in your house that affect your emotional state? And does being around certain people in your house at certain times of the day maybe make you want to be on your phone more? Again, these are all things that lead into that magical word that we all know and love, which is temptation. So again, being aware of all of these things leading into temptations and how you can better wrestle with that is integral to how we design our spaces. So in order to create designated spaces, we first must do a number of things. Creating designated spaces for phone freedom is a beneficial way to change your environment. So number one, we have to identify high-tech areas. Are there areas in your house that lend themselves to using your phone more? How do we identify them? How do we recognize them? Spot rooms in areas where tech use is high. Consider where you most often use your phone and pay attention to tech clutter, like multiple devices in one area. That is huge for identifying high-tech areas. Next, we have to evaluate our tech-driven habits. Reflect on your habits linked to specific spaces. Ask yourself, do you check your phone first thing when you get into bed or when you get out of bed every morning? And consider if tech use in certain spaces is habitual or necessary. And when you, again, attack it from the root, you all of a sudden begin making changes that start to last. Next, we have to consider distraction triggers, right? These are our 5 common triggers. Identifying triggers in your environment that lead to phone use is huge. Reflecting on physical cues like having your phone next to your bed or having your phone not in another room. And noticing psychological cues like reaching for your phone just when you're bored or when you find yourself feeling stressed or in a stressful environment. That's huge. And lastly, here we want to reflect on social influences. We're social creatures. We need to be around people. We need community. But if those people that we're around don't do anything for our phone usage and our phone use habits, then maybe it's time to reevaluate the circle. I want to prioritize comfort and openness in this office. So I guess I'll switch to this here. Kept it simple and just had a nice comfy couch here that I knew that I could literally fall back on whenever I wanted to just feel comfortable or not scroll. I've designated this as a tech-free zone, so I know that every single time that I'm on this couch, it is for meditating or reading or napping. Napping doesn't really work. It's not that comfortable, but it is the space in my house that is designated to be a tech-free zone, and I have that as a psychological and physical trigger that just cues me into knowing that and recognizing that on a daily basis. So here's some tips for regularly adjusting. The big idea here, the big thing to keep in mind is that change is the only constant thing in life, so it's okay to constantly be changing. Awareness, again, I keep going back to this and saying this because it's so true. Awareness of how your environment is and how it's set up and how you interact with it is incredibly key. That's the only way that you can make any sort of adjustments that are informed by truth and by reality. Awareness of when you're cued into picking up your phone and what parts of your environment really lend yourself to. Is there a place on your desk that is perfect for your phone that if you just removed that place on your desk, you would scroll less? Like, it's thinking critically and thinking as granularly as possible, even about that. When I moved, which was an opportunity, that I'm so glad that I took advantage of, I made it a point to make this room, this office, a sanctuary. And despite having my entire mothership of a computer in here, I'm still able to separate my phone usage in this room. And it's great. I know that anytime that I step into this room, I'm feeling more mindful, more creative, and more confident in the things that I want to do. So regularly adjust and assess the things around you in your space or in the spaces that you want to create, and really tune them to make them an environment that is comfortable to be in and is welcoming and is a place that you can't stop thinking about because of how minimized your phone use is in that space. So it is okay to change and it's okay to switch things up. There's not one answer. That's another point of emphasis I want to make throughout this whole entire course, is that there's not one answer to just magically eradicating your phone. It is up to you, the individual, to make the choices of deciding what is the difference between more and enough, and how do you change an environment that is specific to your wants and needs with phone usage. So now that we've adjusted our environment, let's take a deeper look at creating unplugged spaces and moments. But before we do that, as if I even got to say it, let's go over the guided journal questions. So there's 2 questions here. Reflect on your current physical space. What elements or areas influence your taptations the most? So what things around you right now or in the space that you find yourself commonly on your phone influence you to be on your phone? Recognize them, become more aware. What changes right now can you make to your physical environment to reduce screen time? Thank you so much for interacting and going through the 3rd lesson here of the A module. I cannot wait to get to the final lesson, which is all about creating a sanctuary space for you and your phone and your habits with digital mindfulness. I will see you there. Let's do this thing.